Hey, what's up? Teo here. I'm a Crash Team Rumble competitive player and one of the best Town mains out there. With Season 3 slowly coming to its end, I feel it is important to recap what was the Season 3 meta and the high level of gameplay. In order to achieve this goal, I will be making a tier list, making my way up from the bottom to the top characters, trying to give my point of view with their strengths, weaknesses, and how all of this ended up converging in what the balanced state of the season ended up being. Before we start, I'd like to make some stuff clear. First off, this is my opinion. Y'all can have yours and it's totally fine. Second, this applies to high level gameplay, which means it doesn't directly translate into matchmaking experience. And third of all of my takes and opinions are delimited by the competitive rules set and its limits regarding team compositions and power usage. So, with that being clear, and without further ado, let's begin. In D tier is Dr. Engine. Since its release, Engine has not been a particularly strong character. His greatest weakness in this meta lies in the fact that there is a very strong conflict between what he wants to do and what he can do. As a booster, his main mission is to recover gems and collect relics, and unfortunately at both tasks he sucks. The abilities that allow him to generate knockback raise him off the ground, nullifying the reasoning of the gems. This forces Engine to play Flytrap Spitter as the only consistent power to secure gem capture, which is bad since there are a lot of powers that are much better for him. Plus, his horizontal speed is not good enough to reach relics in time, making him a dull character within his role. Furthermore, his combat ability is not strong enough to gain control of relics through kills. His best trait is being annoying as a support blocker / booster in the bank, but in a meta where there is a strong double blocker presence, having a slow, inconsistent support booster with poor combat capabilities feels like throwing a pick. He is not completely useless on maps with a lot of verticality, such as Waist Deep or Surreal Summit, but he falters a lot as a character in general. Dr. Entropy, or Femtropy in short, the most broken character in the history of the game, and in the same way the most nerfed, finally finds herself in a position where it feels she is where she should be. Femtropy in the current meta works pretty decently as a support blocker. Her crazy mobility allows her to get to almost anywhere on the map as soon as necessary, and her melee plus tether combo is much more effective given that the recent buff she received. However, even though she's a much more usable character, she still feels quite gimmicky, in the sense that she is very good at generating knockback and cheap damage. It does not compensate for how vulnerable she is, given that she has a considerably large hitbox and the power of the interaction make her explode instantly since she has no ability to take burst damage, nor does she have a way to deal with it. As a blocker, suffering to resistant interactions is counterproductive since this reduces the effectiveness of her power charge, making their power charge lower. Even more so if we talk about its main use as a support blocker, not being killed but being knocked back. She's above Engine since she's able to cover horizontal distances quite quickly and cover ground with support when necessary. But her impact in-game is greatly reduced by how she deals with pressure in combat in combination with her linear knockback options. At the bottom of B tier, we have Embryo. That character who during Season 1 was completely overwhelmed by the meta finally finds his place as a viable pick. Brio, just like Tropy, works as a wonderful support blocker, because the usefulness of slimes to control the resources of the enemy bank is gigantic, since it allows you to keep the rival team boosters under control by capturing relics in their own area as well as flipping off gems with their slimes. Additionally, his transformation allows him to tank absurd amounts of hits while allowing him to deal equally absurd amounts of damage. He is particularly good on small maps where the gem clusters are close to the bank, allowing him to maximize the utility and range of his slimes without the need to leave the bank. But the cost of such capabilities is what keeps him in this tier. Slimes can be counterproductive in a dual blocker meta because they tend to hinder the main blocker more in his task. Additionally, while the utility of the transformation is enormous, entering it and exiting it leaves Brio very unprotected, opening a huge window for enemy scorers to either score or punish him. Additionally, outside of his brute form, Brio base HP makes him a fairly easy character to kill or incapacitate, to the point where characters like Crash can completely disable him from doing his task. Brio has the potential to be a pretty dangerous character, but he still requires some tweaks to his transformation abilities and sustainability to be able to reach those limits. After the buffs received to both his fireball damage and his cooldowns, Ripto finally feels like a character that has a lot of potential with far more pressure than he has ever been played before. Maps with certain degree of verticality or with gaps turn out to be quite good for Ripto, since it can spike very consistently with Lightning Call, like Seed is great. Unfortunately, the current meta does not favor the fact that Ripto is strong, since there are not characteristics that high-level games require for boosters to have. While the Tsunami plus Lightning Call combo is an absurd source of damage, unfortunately in a meta dedicated to 2 blockers on the bank forces Ripto not to be played as much, since he has innate blocking capabilities. Additionally, Ripto's biggest problem remains his horizontal speed for collecting relics. And yes, given that his relic control comes from getting kills on the bank, it turns out to be an underproductive pick given that currently the best compositions are built around the double blocker, forcing the booster role to be rather mobile and fast, more directed into relic collection. Outside of this meta, Ripto would be at least 1 tier higher, and depending on the Season 4 balance patches, it either might end up on holding with this meta for a while, or totally swapping up for the benefit of Ripto player base. This is possibly one of the most controversial placements on this list, so bear with me. Coco was the 3rd best character in the game for a long time, but after certain nerfs to her combat ability and the cooldowns overall, her effectiveness as a support scorer and as a booster in general fell noticeably quickly. Coco is not a bad character, but the combination of the skills mentioned before made her a crazy booster. The attributes that stand out the most about her right now are the fact that Wall gives absurd utility to the team despite the increase in its cooldown to capture low-cost stations, and that to a certain extent, it also works as a comfortable bank opening to scorers and support the team's scores. Additionally, her speed is quite enviable, since Coco is not only quite fast, but she's versatile within her range of mobility, making her one of the best relic collectors in the game. Her biggest problem is that since her combat capabilities were greatly reduced with the nerf to her spiral attack, fighting for gems is a daunting task for her, since this attack has a very low priority, losing to almost any other attack in the game, not to mention that it does not hit hard enough to be a dangerous amount of damage. Additionally, with her wall and a greater cooldown, supporting the scorers and herself scoring becomes much more riskier since she will be totally vulnerable for a much longer. It is necessary to add that Wall is not an invincible ability, and there are some interactions such as Tana's Uppercut, Brio's Limes, and Illura Flash Kick, or powers such as Bounce Creeps or Garbage Stomp that can counter the protection effect that the Wall may provide. In general, Coco suffers to capitalize on her great collection skills due to her reduced combat capacity, and forces the rest of the team to support her so that she can be truly effective. At the bottom of the B tier plus, we have Catbat. Catbat has the potential to be the best scorer, as they have the safest Wumpa pickup route in the entire game. Furthermore, until before the arrival of Allura, they were the best support character in the game because the burger works as a very powerful utility tool both to ensure kills and to maintain the peace of combat. What stops them from being much better is the fact that, similar to Coco's case, they need the support of other teammates in order to capitalize on their scores. Although her dive bomb has spam and mix-up capabilities, you have the disadvantage that if you fail, it will leave you dazed for a short period of time which is vital since she is totally vulnerable, adding the problem that they do not have a large enough life pool to allow themselves to miss dives. The fact that a character forces you to play based on them and getting out of your own responsibilities on the map gives more of an advantage both positionally and in resources to the opposing team, which tends to have a snowball effect in high-level competitive matches that can result in early defeats. It's time for everyone's favorite dragon, Spyro. With the arrival of Spyro, also came the birth of what I personally consider to be the most fun and frenetic meta in the history of the competitive so far, the double scorer. Spyro has two characteristics that made him a fresh and unique character in the game: his speed and sparks. The combination of these attributes allowed Spyro to cover absurd amount of terrain in very short time, and sparks allowed him to collect resources with great ease, noticeably reducing the needed precision that the speed required, making Spyro what I personally like to call an anti-booster, becoming the best relic collector in the game by far, as well as being the main person responsible for removing Coco from the spotlight as the main relic collector. In addition, its Wumpa collection capacities were not far behind. Although it was only 120 Wumpas, his speed allowed him to greatly capitalize on that amount, allowing him to take on the role of scorer or booster if necessary. Unfortunately for Spyro, with the arrival of the buffs to Tropy, Ripto, and Elora, nerfs also arrived to his skill kit, reducing his Wumpa capacity, which translated to a reduction in his power charge, this being the end of the double scorer era. The biggest problem with Spyro right now is that, as an anti-booster, it works really well. But since this meta does not focus on boosters but on blockers, an anti-booster it's not necessary since there are no boosters to contain. And as a natural scorer, the reduction in his capacity greatly affects its effectiveness, since Spyro is not particularly strong in combat, and fighting against a single blocker already involves an investment of a significant amount of resources that often resulted in Spyro retreating and re-entering the combat until the block was broken. In a double blocker meta, it is impossible for Spyro to break that barrier through his own combat, and even if he managed to do so, it would end up with him scoring really small amounts of Wumpa after the combat, making him a less viable pick. There are still some maps where Spyro and double scorer in general can work, like Summer Forest or Jazz Junction, but in general, the meta kicks him way outside of what his capacities allowed him to do. On top of B tier, we have Ripperoo. Ripperoo is one of my favorite characters regarding his gameplay, and I consider myself quite a fan of Roo players at high levels, because said players have managed to evolve the Roo meta enough to consider him to some extent not only a support blocker, but a complete main blocker. The damage of Roo's bombs is considerably high, with also ignoring that its mobility is quite decent, having coverage at long distance with its cannon and at short distance with its bombs, which combined with its kick result in potential for combos and totally absurd aerial mobility. The main reason he's not so high is the fact that although the meta led him to be a main blocker, he is still the weakest main blocker, and dealing with many enemies at the same time results in a titanic task for the character. Likewise, his HP is not particularly high, so if he makes a mistake or gets caught and punished in some setups with his bombs, the possibility of killing him is quite achievable. Also, in order to be effective, Roo has to stay in the air consistently, which can be detrimental while blocking as a main blocker, because in case of carelessness, it is possible to capture with the custody of a Roo in the air. Furthermore, their bombs have a secondary problem, which is them not generating damage, knockback, or even both. Roo is a great character, and in a double blocker meta he stands out a lot, but he still needs some tweaks to be able to position himself higher on the list. If Coco's position was controversial, this one will most likely be even more so. The following character is responsible for this meta being born. This character is the responsible for characters like Ripto or Spyro reducing their viability despite being completely solid. I present to you bottom tier A, Elora. At first glance, Elora does not appear to be challenging. As a solo blocker, she easily turns out to be the worst blocker in the game, having almost zero ability to contain more than one enemy at a time, as well as sharing the smallest life pool with Corix and Engine. So what makes her so special? Elora is the best support blocker in the game and by an unrealistic margin. The double blocker meta is born because of Elora and her particular ability to heal. this ability stacked with fridges, causing Elora plus Courage to generate inhuman amount of instant HP. But it's not just that. In addition to her great power to sustain unsustainable combat with her healing, Elora's damage received several buffs during the last patch, turning tornadoes into medium-range zoning tools with a lot of damage. Additionally, her flash kicks allow her to deal large amounts of damage in an instant with a hitbox large enough to cover the entirety of the character model, and small tornadoes allow her to deal chip damage at short range, which is perfect for finishing fights. Although her mobility is nothing out of this world, the general utility that the character provides is so great that it allows her to support any character who finds himself in a dangerous or low HP situation. A parallel with Overwatch would be to take Mercy and give her Zenyatta Destruction Orbs and Transcendence. The definitive support. Dingodile is the blocker. A lot of HP, a lot of damage, not very fast, but completely consistent within his kit. Dingo is easily one of the most balanced characters in the game. He has clear weaknesses and very exploitable strengths. What makes him so special in this meta is that initially, he's the only blocker who has the ability to solo block with complete peace of mind, because his damage and knockback allows him to move easily within high pressure or instant damage situations. He's the closest thing to an almost impenetrable wall. The second thing is that Dingo turns out to be the best synergy for Elora, because while Dingo can control his space with complete safety, at medium distances he begins to suffer, because he leaves his effective range. With Elora in the equation, she can keep enemies at bay at medium range with her tornadoes, while Dingo does so at close range. And Elora's sustain allows Dingo to be much more aggressive with his approaches, given that he's being pocketed by a character who may be consistently healing him. If Dingo was previously a beast, he is currently a force to be feared in combination with Elora. The difference is that Elora depends on Dingo to be as dangerous as she is, but Dingo does not depend on anyone to be a threat. The third best character in the game turns out to be none other than Crash. Crash has 3 advantages. First off, having the Scooter passive, where essentially doing any activity adds to his power charge. Second, having the maximum amount of Wumpa collection capacity, being 140. And finally, having one of the most spammable attacks with the highest priority in the entire game, Slide Spin. The combination of these 3 threats simultaneously make Crash a big threat. Crash doesn't need to kill in order to score. The priority that Slide Spin has over the vast majority of attacks is insane, to the point where it can consistently send characters like Dingodile flying. Not only that, Slide Spin also happens to be a great mobility tool for Crash, granting him great speed and coverage in order to either push or disengage when required. Now, the fact that you don't need to kill to secure scores is not synonymous with the fact that you do not have the tools to do so. The Crash moveset, which although simple, is designed to create complex combos which allow him to hit absurdly hard, being able to eliminate characters with low life pools in a single interaction. Of course, these combos come with a certain level of difficulty, but the fact that there is proof that these exist and have been used in high-level games speak volumes about the impact that a good Crash can have on a match. At this point, if you are consistent in the game, it will not be difficult for you to understand why Tawna is in this position. As one of the best Tawna mains, I can assure you that this character received the bullshit deluxe package, because her entire kit is absolutely crazy. Her damage is totally stupid. She has an spammable attack that generates stun lock when executed, which can also be used to spike in the presence of gaps and voids, aka uppercut overhead combo. Not only that, but her dash has the highest priority level in the game, along with Crash Light Spin and Dingo Charge Tail Whip, which also does more damage than the uppercut overhead combo. Both combos are comboable with each other if you catch someone with a hook, generating a total out of place accumulated damage. This same hook, if it catches you, can generate a different kind of stun lock, but it also does not necessarily force you to commit into attacking, since it can be cancelled midway. This same cancellation gives her 4 vertical jumps and an active hitbox that makes her almost invulnerable at short range. Her mobility with her hookshot allows her to cross the map with great speed, but also allows her to reach areas that are totally unreachable for a good handful of characters. Not only that, she also has the second highest Wumpa storage capacity in the game, this being 130. Given her mobility, she can collect relics the same way a booster would without any difficulty, or help the blocker coverage with the enemy bank. And to top it off, she turns out to be one of the two biggest counters to both Dingodile and Elora. Yeah, this character's dumb. There are only two reasons why Tana is not in the S tier just yet. First off, her hookshot has a significant startup, which leaves her quite unprotected, so attacking impulsively does not always work well and can end up with Tana completely disabled. Added to that her health pool is not really that big, so if she gets dragged in a combo, she might die quite quickly. And the second problem is that there is a character who can disable all of Tana's oppressive abilities and keep her under control, which is none other than... Cortex is the best character in the game and maintains his crown for the remaining of Season 3. His combat ability and combat mobility are what make him so absurdly terrifying to deal with. Because his weapon has auto-aim at short to medium range, he's able to deal consistent damage while staying in a safe space. His polyshot ability is absolutely strong since it completely disables your movement for the duration of the transformation. The piano turns out to be notoriously strong for zoning platforms and banks, as well as being a source of significant damage. Since Cortex is so outstanding in combat, he does not see the need to search for relics. As long as he is in combat against any other players, he will have a consistent source of relics. Not only that, while Cortex normally takes a defensive role, he can take an oppressive approach without much difficulty and open space for the scorers. Not only that, but his dashes allow him to be a little hunter, having the ability to follow up players with low health and ensure eliminations, an action that implies more relics for him, as well as getting insane mobility, getting up to 4 jumps with his vertical dashes. Another important aspect is that he turns out to be the direct counter to Tana, Elora, and Dingo, making him almost mandatory to be able to break the alignment of this meta. And the most concerning thing about the matter is that this character has received 4 consecutive nerfs during the life of the game, and yet he remained a beast to be feared. The evolution of the balance state has taken quite interesting turns regarding this season. Although I don't really like this meta, it is what it is, and the only thing we can do is wait for new experiences Toys for Bob will bring us during the upcoming seasons. Really looking forward to new characters and to see how they really end up shaping or even rebuilding the meta in the same way that Spyro and Elora did this season. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned.